Hey everybody, this is Andy from Tennis Euphoria, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Yonex Ezone 98 2022. So an update on the popular 2020 version, which I certainly review very favourably. I actually recommended that racket to some friends and one of my hitting partners who's a really advanced player and coach, and a number of people actually adopted it after I recommended it, and a couple have played really well with it with the customizations that I recommended of 4 grams of lead at 3 and 9. And a leather grip. That's a personal thing, I guess. So big boots to fill with this update. It was already a nice racket that played well. On the face of it, this looks like quite a subtle update. You've got a new paint job with more of a light blue emphasis, which personally I think looks great. But you have similar key features, and the specs are largely unchanged. 305 grams unstrung weight, 98 square inch head size, 16 by 19 string pattern, similar tech as to the previous. 306 grams mine came in, so quality control as ever from Yonex is good. My balance point was on spec. One thing that I think is always worth noting is that the E-Zones get mixed reviews around comfort. I always find the VDM mesh to be quite dampening, and certainly I've never had any comfort issues, but I know some have experienced some problems with the line. I've hit with this for 2 weeks and haven't experienced any discomfort at all, so that can only be a good thing. General characteristics of the E-Zone. So the E-Zone is the supposed easy to play with line. It's the racket where power meets control, and for me the 98 is the one which is true to that statement of power meeting control. I think in the 100 you have more power and more of an obvious sort of tweener power racket, but I think the 98, certainly in the last 2 iterations, were rackets that had enough power but also offered pretty good control. So despite the blue colour, which often indicates lots of power, they are powerful enough but they still offer good control, and that seems to be the case here. I initially strung mine with a full bed of black Yonex Polytour Pro at £54. That was good. I wanted to string just that little bit higher initially to see how that played, but I always had the intention of lowering that tension a little. But it played pretty well with the Polytour Pro, which I think is, a good quality string with good all-round playability. Durability on that actually was pretty good, I thought, as well. In terms of initial thoughts and characteristics on the racket, so you have the characteristic generous sweet spot that is always there with the E-Zones. This one, I didn't feel a desperate need to customize compared to the others. And I suppose on the face of it, the subtle changes to this evolution could potentially be a downside for me when I consider my preferences, because it is now a little bit thicker in the beam, only a very subtle thickening of the beam, and also a touch stiffer at 65 RA, both characteristics that typically from a personal perspective would take things in a negative direction. But I have to say, in this instance, I think that the changes, and I also understand there's a subtle change to the design in the hoop, actually do evolve the racket quite well. So going back to that not being immediately desperate to customize it, it feels a little bit more stable than the previous version, which I think was an improvement. Not that the previous was unstable, but there's an improvement in stability here. I also got quite a nice feel from this. So it's been a little while since I hit the last one, but I thought that the last was sort of feeling good, and I was connected, but clearly I'd feel more connected to my racket of choice, or rackets with a lower RA, which I prefer. But I got a nice feeling and connection, a nice dwell time from this, and I could sort of sense and feel drop shots well. On the slice, I guess I could do with more weight, if I'm honest, but this is where the racket, I think, really excels. Full swings, aggressive, committed shots, and I think stepping in and taking aggressive swings on the ball, the Ezone really rewards that because the sweet spot is generous and gives you that little bit of wiggle room when you're attacking. And there's ample power, but actually the response is quite controlled. And the more I was playing with it, the more I really felt that I could hit my spots with quite a lot of confidence, particularly on my forehand. And my forehand, is quite old-fashioned in terms of its grip. So that's a real positive thing. As time went on with the racket, I restrung and felt that I came across a much better string combination. So I took the tension down to 51 pounds and I strung with a edged poly, and then I still went with the Yonex Poly Tour Pro in the crosses. But in the mains, that edged poly actually thought really changed the characteristics of the racket really well, and going down in tension just opened up that sweet spot a little, gave a little bit more dwell time on response and increased power a little bit, and I felt that combination just seemed to work really, really well. One slight downside for me would be the swing weight is quite low, sitting down at a target of 318, and for me I need a little bit more mass to generate good pace on my serve. So it was noticeable for me that I wasn't getting the same pace from the Ezone 2022 as I would from rackets that I pick to play with in a competitive scenario. But again, that is something that could quite easily be improved with a bit of added plough and swing weight through some weight. It certainly is good for targeting your serve. I picked it up straight away and was being pretty consistent with my serving and finding my targets. So again, adding to that sense of having a decent control behind the racket. So overall thoughts then, I think that this is an evolution from the 2020 in the sense that it is an improvement. It's amazing how just a small change on the beam thickness can improve stability, but somehow it hasn't taken anything away from feel, which is great. So I think this plays better in stock form than it does previously in the 2022 version, and that's great. It certainly gives easy access to playing tennis well, and I think that the Ezone encourages you to try and play great tennis and play aggressive tennis. It almost sort of gives you a real confident shot because of that extended sweet spot that I always think the isometric heads give you. If the booms were looking to move into this space and offer kind of good sweet spot, nice bit of power and easy access to playability for people, then I suppose you could argue that they've done that. But for me, this Ezone is a much better option. It's better feeling. I think that power levels are comparable. Comfort seems to be there. So it's a really good all-round package, and certainly I think that by making the same customizations as I did to the 2020, this could then also be a fantastic platform and a great racket for the advanced player too. For me, one thing to keep in mind is that Yonex grips are quite unique. They're quite flat. If you're used to grips at the bottom that bulge out a little like Head or Wilson, then there is always a difference with any Yonex racket. I've found that is a good thing to avoid blisters, but certainly for me, it detracts a little bit from the feel just in terms of what I'm used to. So keep that in mind if you're looking to switch to Yonex. Always demo first, and that applies to all of the Yonex rackets, but it is something that people sometimes underestimate. So big thumbs up from me. It continues to be an awesome stick. If I was a competing player, this would be high on my list, partly because of quality control being so good, but also because of that playability and that encouraging sentiment that it gives you to hit out with confidence and play aggressive all-court tennis. It does everything really well, and certainly I will customise it to see how it plays. Hope that was helpful. Next up is the Clash 98 V2 with that 16 by 20 string pattern and slightly stiffer RA. At last we might have a Clash for the advanced player. Also the Blade V8 and the Eager Technofiber is coming up, so subscribe to the channel if you want to see those reviews, and please do like the video if this was of use to you, as that really helps me out. See you soon.